Promise me. Promise me.
And welcome everybody to the Casually Hardcore Podcast, Episode 3. My name is Brian, and we've got a lot to talk about. We've got loot boxes, we've got all kinds of things with Final Fantasy, we got patch 3.25 coming out pretty soon. We got the release date on that. Got a lot of news, and we got a special guest that I want to intro today. Now, he hasn't actually seen this. I'm really excited about this, so let's welcome our special guest.
I'm looking. I'm looking. Should I be listening too?
Oh, no, you're good, yeah. You can listen, you can look.
All right. Oh, okay.
All right. Thank you very much,
awesome.
everybody. Yes, I spent a little bit of time on that. Welcome, MrHappy. Thank you for joining us here on Casually Hardcore.
All right. I just got to it, so I wanted to make sure I finished the whole thing first.
Yes, absolutely.
There we go.
So
that's why I'm just like, what am I looking at?
What are you looking for? What's happening here? So welcome, MrHappy. Thank you so much for joining us. We reached out to you like last year saying, hey, we're going to be doing this podcast. And you agreed, it's like, and I was like, we got probably about 4 or 5 months. And it's been that time. So 4 or 5 months later. So welcome.
And then another 2 weeks for me not seeing the first email because I was busy at the time.
Well, you're a busy man.
That didn't help.
So what are you working on? Let's just kind of kick it off with the first section. And just kind of like a light intro. Like, you've been playing a lot of games, dude. So I saw that you recently just finished and played through Chrono Trigger, which made me personally very happy. Say hello, and what are you playing?
Hello, everyone. I'm MrHappy. Currently, I'm devoting a lot of time to all the recent RPG launches since December, I guess. Upcoming is Final Fantasy 15 on PC and the royal additions to that game. We have Final Fantasy 14 patch 4.25. We have Ni no Kuni 2 in March as well. And currently, directly in front of my keyboard right now is the City of Final Fantasy Opera Omnia, which is a mobile game.
Yeah.
I've been devoting as you can tell that I'm looking down at the screen right now, a fair amount of time towards. And I just do that every day, pretty much.
Oh man, dude! It is rather impressive on that, and the fact is that you're enjoying that mobile game. Well, give me a quick overview of your thoughts. How many hours have you put into it, and what do you feel? How do you feel about it?
I've been playing for 2 weeks now, 12 hours a day.
And streaming. Are you?
Well, I streamed this and whatever I'm streaming at the same time.
I got you.
I put a little box in the corner because I have it hooked up via a capture card. So it almost looks like a little add-on to 14 in the bottom right.
Nice,
but it's not.
It's a game within a game.
It's a game within a game. Yeah,
well,
it's Final Fantasyception for me.
If you're doing any kind of DPS queue, you got to have something while you wait for that.
Oh, please! I go tanks and healers.
Well, that's right. Like I do too. I do too, but I've already leveled all of them, and it's like, okay, all that's left to level is DPS, and that's just
I've got everything at 70.
Man. It's no
so
way to
I'm
live.
good. I'm good. I got everything at 70 on one character, although I need my ninja leveled on my alt now. So what am I gonna do?
Oh, what are you gonna do?
It's just a free to play mobile game, Final Fantasy centric, and doesn't have a stamina system, so I haven't stopped playing it. I haven't stopped playing it.
That's good. Yeah, and it's free. So.
And it's free.
All right, so we're going to jump into our first topic for the day. It's kind of intro in news, obviously. In this case, we talked about a couple things, like in the pre-show, loot boxes, ESRB, many things that are going on in the world of video games. And so Hawaii is they're debating on the show floor, talking about loot boxes. So loot boxes being heavy on that, but there's a lot of other little things, namely like the Chrono Trigger PC port, and essentially MrHappy's face brings it up perfectly, because when we talk about 15 PC, when we talk about 12 PC, and then we talk about Final Fantasy 6 and Chrono Trigger PC, it's like there's this real big inconsistency. So that's really what this section's about. I want to kick it over to Happy as our guest, kind of get a dealer's choice in this case. Do you want to talk about loot boxes first, or do you want to talk about PC ports by Square Enix?
I mean, loot box is always the interesting one because we've dealt with loot boxes since we were kids. I look back at trading card games; those were loot boxes to me. Mm-hmm. So it's really just the malicious use of them, and the fact that Hawaii's debating, I think, is a positive thing for the industry. I think it needs to be more clearly defined what makes a loot box unacceptable, as opposed to just banning them outright.
Yeah.
Or what an acceptable, I guess, business model around them would look like. Again, playing Opera Omnia, it has gacha, which is, the Japanese equivalent to what a loot box would be. But it's not frowned upon in the same way that when you throw it into a full price game like Star Wars, which started this whole debacle in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So where is the line really drawn? What makes it that way? Is it clarity? Is it what you're being charged? Is it how much it affects the game itself? And I think that outside of just the law itself, that's probably going to be something that needs to be more clearly defined.
Yeah, and it's something that hasn't gone. It's gone on a long time. Chris, you got a thought here on this one?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people point to the SRB and say we have our own regulating body. I don't know why lawmakers have to get involved. Mm-hmm. And the answer is because the regulating body doesn't care about it. It in no way affects the rating of a game.
Right.
It in no way is displayed on the game. A game can be marketed one way and they can change their view on loot boxes post-release. Mm-hmm. So you can buy a game because you don't like loot boxes and they can add it, or you can buy a game because you do like loot boxes and they can take it away. There is no tie to the rating system, no tie to the marketing. They don't have to show odds, which means they can adjust them on the fly.
And they do.
So if they want to have, if they want to guarantee that every 10th time you win, because they've statistically found out that's the number to hijack your brain just a little bit more, they can. If you win a little bit too often, they can take those away. So unlike Vegas, they're not tied to a consistent odds that they have to show. And the problem with that is if you abuse a system a little bit, the government tends to come in and overreach. And so if you can't take care of it, then the government could come in and say, okay, now these games can't be sold without an ID that says you're over 21. And we're all going to think that's highly inconvenient. And it's the gaming industry's fault. Like you let it get to this because you absolutely refused at every turn to stop just focusing on the money.
Did I look at loot boxes as like the modern day, like Tiger handheld games? Like, why are people buying these? I just like, how is this acceptable in any way as a product?
When it gets looped into progression, when it gets looped into this, like you said, where the Japanese equivalent of gachu, it ends up, it's interesting because it's training people. Like, so we grew up with it with trading cards, right? Yeah. I think there's a key difference that a lot of people do make that comparison. I think that comparison doesn't connect one dot, is that I could trade cards with you. Like, so Happy and I were, I got this card I don't care for. And then that could be the thing you want. There's none of that. So it's a closed system. If it was an open system, it'd be a little bit more understandable because then you could trade these things. Oh, I got this skin for this, whatever. Well, let me just give it to you.
And it's tied to progression. Mm-hmm. So the cards you had at home did not make you any better or worse at the sport when you went out and played on Saturday.
Oh, magic.
This actually does. So when you talk about here, it's like at the end of a PvP match, they can say, well, Brian had this other card and that's probably why he beat you. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of encourages me to go off and try to get that card.
Right. I think one of the things that's really interesting about the whole thing, so we brought up the ESRB, and both of you guys actually did, and talking about it as a regulatory body. The ESRB just recently came out and said that they had their loot box plan. They're going to put a sticker on the back of the box, which doesn't say loot boxes, just in-game purchases, which already exists. Yeah, agreed. And they're going to have some kind of campaign to help inform parents about this. Basically, in my opinion, the ESRB came out and did nothing. They just... Yeah.
That's nothing.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're going to have to put it on every game.
I was going to say.
So it doesn't separate anything out.
No.
And so from that perspective, the ESRB really sided with publishers, right? I don't think anybody can disagree with that. And with that joining of the publisher, obviously it looks that they're, Polygon reported on this. The publishers gave zero pushback with this change because, again, like Chris said, they can always introduce it after the box came out.
The NFL has to admit that concussions happen by saying that the game involves hitting, and then they just have to say it involves hitting. Yeah, and nobody's upset about that.
And so that's why I think the thing that's going on in Hawaii is really quite fascinating as it relates to that, because if the ESRB isn't doing anything from a regulatory perspective, that they're just being, this is just really just kind of a non-move. It's okay, well, they did this so that they could say, we did something.
So who takes control?
Well, that's the thing. It's supposed to be the ESRB. It's supposed to be the ESRB, but now the Hawaii, it's like that's the only option.
So is it state governments? Is it the trade starts the state because it's money?
Yeah, Happy you got that.
Does it get looped in more towards gambling regulation? Mm-hmm. But all of those people are not people you want running this.
No,
Agreed.
no, you really don't. You really don't want any of them leveling it. I mean, there's also, yeah.
It gets a lot harder for indie developers to exist when there starts being regulatory bodies. It starts to stifle innovation. It starts to do all these things because we couldn't be trusted to be reasonable.
And that's, I mean, that's why the ESRB was founded in the first place. I remember when it was founded. I remember being a kid and my parents being so upset about Mortal Kombat, and that was the big thing.
Yeah, that was the game that did it.
And well, there was also another game like House Trap or something like that, where it had like actresses and actors, and there was vampires. It was on the Sega
that was
CD.
the one I was on the one of the CD consoles.
Yeah, exactly. And so like those two, like in conjunction there, I remember like, oh my gosh, they were ruining the kids. Like the senators, like it was initiated at the Senate. And they had all these hearings and video game violence impacting kids negatively, all these things. And so then the video game industry said, well, let's form the ESRB, which will be that. And so some people will say like, well, it's not really on them. What do you expect? It's like, well, I expect them to do their job. And they came out with a rating system. And now their job is to inform customers in an appropriate way. And I think what people have suggested isn't a stretch of the imagination. Like, odds. Okay, cool. Now, and then we also have like, how do we
10% chance of a rare? That's all it has to tell me.
Yeah. But the fact is that it is never 10%. It could literally be 3%. And then you're about to quit the game. Like as soon as Happy's ready to walk away from whatever game, they could say, let's bump him up to 90. And then he's going to get that one thing he wants. So he's going to keep spending money with us.
You haven't played in 2 weeks. We're going to shoot one to your email. And that one has a 100% chance to drop a rare because we found that giving you one free rare under the guise of a loot box will bring you back to the game.
Yeah. I'm frustrated. Happy, how do you feel?
I can tell. I feel like it's a slippery slope because, again, I'm sitting here playing a game that essentially has loot boxes right in front of me.
Right.
And they hand me, I know every gem they hand me, every free draw ticket they hand me is a psychological effort to get me to continue investing until I reach the point where I'm a paying customer.
Right.
I'm not oblivious to it, but at the same time, it's not in any way inhibiting 12 hours a day I play, and I'm playing 12 hours a day without putting any money in. So do I just hit a point where I feel like it's okay to spend the money? It's like where do we draw the line? When is a loot box okay? Does it, because again, tied into progression, it's weapons and armor in this game. So why is this so much more acceptable than in another game? Is it because it's full priced, or is it because
that does come into
gambling?
That does come into play, and so like on that is that I think that's where a lot of people, and let me know if I'm anywhere, in the wheelhouse here with you, Happy, but if you paid $60 for a game and then this was the mechanic, would you feel ripped off? Or if you didn't pay anything for it and this was the mechanic, is it justifiable?
I think I just want transparency. So if you put buffet on the sign out front, and I come in and I ask for a second slice of pizza and it's free, and then I ask for another Coke and you say, actually, after your first Coke, you only get water, I'm going to feel ripped off.
Okay.
I think it's all about what relationship did we have when I walked in the door.
And when you walk in the door, the first thing I see in this game, the very first thing it says is, while this game is free to play, there are purchases and items that will only be available if you invest in this. It's the first thing. It's a message while the game is loading, and then they also do have odds published.
Well, that's
everywhere.
That's a good step, and that's them, the publishers, making the step so that other people don't then enforce it on them. Like, let's say Hawaii did what they do. Let's say it does pass. All of a sudden, how does that work? Only Hawaii is now restricted from this game? Right, it doesn't.
They'll have to start making those rules will almost roll out nationwide, because they're not going to run one strategy for Asia, one strategy for Europe, one strategy for North America, and one strategy for Hawaii. I mean, that's insane. Right. They'll have to just start making
how would Hawaii enforce it? There's only companies based in Hawaii that they can enforce it on. Can they enforce it on the civilians? Like, then no company just... If it's on the companies, then they just don't enforce it there.
Where we're releasing in 49 states, okay.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden games become like some kind of smuggled good into Hawaii.
What about things like Amazon? Yeah. When I order it, it needs to know that they have to have it on all packaging, because when you order from a site like Amazon, they're not going to have in their warehouse, oh, well, this stack goes to Hawaii and this stack goes to any other address. It's got to just be something that can just leave the warehouse.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
I was just going to say, and one of the big things with gambling, and this is something I've had a discussion about, I saw over in my chat, somebody posted something, that one of the big things with gambling is you have to have a chance of walking away with nothing. Whereas with a loot box, you may not walk away with the thing you want, but you are walking away with something. But then the question then becomes, does something need to have a physical value? Like a digital item that cannot be sold or traded or anything has no value.
Right.
That's it. It's just it's yours and you have it. So that's another thing.
That's where they get themselves in trouble with like the skins trading and stuff like that for some of these games.
Yeah,
where
CS:GO
you can
and
go to
like
other websites and you can cash out. Because the moment you can cash out, these items become poker chips.
Yeah.
They are.
There's so many facets
literally
to it.
gambling. And that's why you don't want a legal body coming in, because they're going to make one rule fit all, and it's not going to fit them all equally. And some of these systems are going to get punished harder than others.
Right.
So because a few systems abuse it, I mean, I look at Call of Duty, you get these cards that are duplicates all the time.
Right.
And so you get next to nothing. But I also get my loot boxes free after like every time I complete a challenge and every time I complete a mission and a contract. And when I log in, I get like one every 4 hours or something like that. So it just gives them to you. So it doesn't make me think that I need money.
I think I have a complex relationship with this topic because essentially, even Final Fantasy XIV has the loot box. It's like if you go into the diadem, which don't. If you go into there, they're
gonna be in Eureka too.
They're gonna be, and that's fine because it's something that's like fun and you acquire, and then you get that. I think they should just add them to Fates over the entire game, just so that you acquire these things, you turn them in. You can't purchase them, but it's just this making something interesting that could end up being cool, but it's not a part of progression because we already have.
But can I buy it with real money?
No, not at all.
Then it's different.
Oh, of course.
It's a box with loot in it, but it's not a loot box.
Correct.
So how does this stretch over to things like World of Warcraft? When you talk about your ability to cash it out, right? When you can turn gold back into money.
But it's still all within in Blizzard's ecosystem, right? So it's like you still have you can make gold in WoW, and then you can use it to purchase like time or games or things of that nature. But it's still within their closed ecosystem for that topic. Happy, it's been how long? Are you still playing WoW, or has it been a while for you since?
No, I haven't played WoW seriously since I did server first prog and Heroic Cataclysm.
Okay. So, like, have you seen or experienced any kind of the gold for time system, etc.?
I mean, I've seen it. I saw it in WildStar too before when WildStar first launched. So when WoW did it, I wasn't too surprised. But
I'm surprised.
I think Eve did it first.
Yeah.
I liked it. I like. Well, yeah, Eve and Eve is the OG.
For a major title.
Yeah. I like the idea only because it ultimately doesn't get you anywhere. Right. You can have something shinier on your character, but it doesn't get you anywhere if you buy it with gold.
In Blizzard's thing, though, right now, which is fascinating, is that you could actually make gold to pay for your Destiny 2 game. You could actually make enough gold to pay for whatever. It's all within their Battle.net ecosystem, and that's kind of where I'm like, wow, like just think of just that topic. But as far as Chris's original,
so what if you were upgrading your armor in your mobile game by Gil, effectively Gil in 14? So you made so much money in 14 that you could cash it into Square Enix dollars. You could take Square Enix dollars and take it over to the mobile game and spend them on.
I would support that system. That sounds
better than what I do with Gil now.
Yeah.
It's nothing.
Gil is such this bad or pointless currency. So Gil has two values in it. It's either needed or you have too much. Like it's like you never. There's never this like sense of like, oh man, I really got to go work on this thing. I don't have any Gil gold. Once you get your house,
I want more, and I have no interest in actually doing anything to get it.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I am. I've been for a long time. I spend it once every 7 months, and that's it.
Yeah. Oh, like let me get that extra piece of gear that just got crafted.
The whole set.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Probably for you. I'm just like I'm good. Jumping back though on the loot box topic before we jump into kind of our main topic we wanted to get Happy's opinion on here is that I have a gray area with loot boxes because essentially like with a box of loot is fun, it's interesting, but then also as a parent, one of the things that everybody's talked about here is that there's training. Like Happy's an adult, he can choose to spend the money if he wants to or not, but for somebody like my children or parents out there with kids, like these games are training them for that to be an acceptable norm, to be able to spend money, etc. How the question comes up a lot, and this is a kind of a bigger topic, and maybe we'll have that for another podcast at some point. But think about gaming addiction. You think about these like issues, like any alcoholism, drug addiction. Like there are human beings out there that have an inclination to addiction and addictive type personalities. And so this in and of itself can be, and Happy's pointing to himself in this case, this in and of itself can be something that like you train, and all of a sudden you find yourselves in your 30s and your 40s, and you're like, you're addicted to these loot box cycles and that's when you go from a gamer to what game publishers call whales. And that's where it's like you're just dropping in hundreds of dollars on a game that cost you nothing, it was free, as opposed to that is $60. And I think the biggest outrage, to kind of put a pin on it, is that we're already paying. Now they're bringing that concept and bringing it in hard in $60 games that we have that expectation of payment. Hey, I've already given you money. And I don't have an issue with games trying to like monetize addition. That I think that's something that like the game either needs to increase its price, which it won't because people won't purchase it, or they find other ways to kind of help offset the costs. And that essentially became the system, and it's unregulated and it's undefined. And essentially, I think already companies have already stated this fact, and it's like, well, how do you get around it? Well, they won't sell loot boxes. They'll sell you currencies that you can buy loot boxes with, and that gets them completely around the problem. Anyway,
also one I guess final point is that the games aren't actually getting more expensive. Some companies are choosing to spend more as an excuse, like they'll hire way more people and like send people on like physical trips to location. We studied the exact angle of the fish and the pyramids, and then they'll be like, well, we need this to pay for all those extra costs, and they don't. But that'll be the industry reason. I mean, if an indie game without loot boxes come out for $30, be profitable, made by 3 dudes, I don't think we need tens, hundreds of millions of dollars to make a AAA title. And I think some AAA titles prove that nowadays, that they can be successful on purchase loan. They're businesses. Gaming is a business.
Yeah.
They're businesses. That's it. That's all it is. There's nothing else to it. They are businesses. End of story. They want money.
Yeah. Well, and that's what they're there to do. I think if they don't, well, I think Chris, you kind of made a point, and I'll let you make it here again, talking about not everything's successful. Do you remember that one? No,
I don't remember exactly what we were talking about. So
go ahead.
No, I think the big thing to note here is that these companies, any company's job is to be good to its employees to make money. You need to be able to retain enough of your talent that you can benefit the people that are driving the ship. And so a company's job is not to have ethics or morality or anything like that. And a government's job is to protect us from things that might harm us, even if they don't mean to. They might have good intentions. I think these companies actually think that they're coming out with good games that are entertaining. And they don't really have to worry about that they made some 8-year-old into an addict as a 40-year-old because they can't get their life together. Yeah. It's not their problem. And so all this regulation is aiming to do is say, if they're not going to actively get out in front of this, that if they create a problem, they have to be the ones to clean it up. That's really all I think the regulation will aim to do. The problem is this regulation is being written by people who are not gamers. Look at the average age of a politician. There's no way they're gamers.
Right.
There just isn't. We're the first generation that grew up on games. So if it has to be regulated, it has to be regulated by the politicians of today, which are inherently not going to understand what we as a community want. And that's really frustrating. So I don't know what the solution is, but I think that's where it comes to a head, is you have one group of people who just want to protect us, and you have one group of people who just want to make money entertaining us, and they just have absolutely opposing ideas of how that needs to get done. All right.
Thank you, guys. Fantastic topic. I am very much looking forward to the comments on this one later on YouTube. But
they'll all be positive.
No,
they're going to count how many times I've done this and look down like, am I dying? Hold on.
All right, so topic number 2, games as a service. When is a game done? This was inspired by, we have a good comment here by Hassan. This actually came from a video that you posted this week, Mr. Happy, focusing in on Final Fantasy 15. We have the Royal Edition, which you said that's on your schedule to play here soon. But also, there was just a lot here. So, Chris, would you mind reading that comment to everybody?
He said, sure, why not? I'm sure as hell not getting into Royal Edition. I'd rather wait until the game gets its completely, ultimately, definitely done edition. Game does DLC is how disjointed the episodes feel. And honestly, this will keep getting worse the more episodes they add. I do appreciate the fact that the game is getting more cut off.
Read more.
Read more. That's all I got.
There we go.
He seems to think that it's disjointed how the episodes are getting added as DLCs. I don't think that's a new concept. What are your thoughts on Royal Edition?
To clarify on that, it's not so much how disjointed they feel, it's that you would have to leave the main game. They fill in gaps in the main game, and you have to leave the main game and go to the DLC to play them.
That's how they're disjointed. It would be so nice if it was weaved in, like after the fact, you know, in that perspective.
Yeah.
But the main point that this comment was getting at, we actually have a few others we'll feature in the community feedback section at the end of this.
So I'm not familiar with Royal Edition.
Okay.
What's the controversy surrounding that?
So Royal Edition is basically, you know how games do like a Game of the Year edition kind of thing, and they maybe include all the DLC that they may have had or updates to the game. Royal Edition at its core is that. It's all the DLCs that came out last year, which when the base game was $60 plus the $25 for the season pass, and is now being released for $50. On top of that, they're updating the base game to have new content that wasn't in the base game. And if you own the base game, you'll need to buy the Royal Pack for another $20 to get that new stuff that's in the base game itself. So if you bought the base game a year and a half ago, you're essentially paying 60 plus 25 plus 20 for what people are now buying for 50. That's where most of the controversy is sitting.
And I think for me, especially as somebody who's like, I've actually really enjoyed 15. There was a lot that worked. There was stuff that didn't, but they've also updated some things with it. For me, like obviously this also coincides with the launch of the PC edition. And, and so for me, like I'm looking at it like, okay, well, do I wait and get the ultimate Royal Majesty of the Crown edition that's going to...
Royal Cup Noodle edition.
Royal Cup Noodle edition. Because we know that they're already bringing out more DLC. You know, they've already announced like 3, now I think even 4 new episodes, right? I think it was just announced this week or last week. We're getting a 4th. So this is the game that never ends. and that's really what I wanted to talk about as a whole topic, because when are games done? In the pre-show, we kind of teased a little bit about Division. Happy, you've had it, you played it at the beginning, and they've continued to support it. And essentially one of the things that I got noticed is that 1.8 came out, and people are saying like, this is incredible. So I went and got it, and I'm like, yes. Now, I didn't get burned. You know, people who came in and were hurt by it were, you know, like, oh, and now they're like, no, I'm never going to play that again. And so the question is that when are games done? Like, we look at 15. When is 15 going to be finished? Division, like, are we going to see this trend go forward with all games? And essentially, all games are going to shift to a service-based model. And with updates like the Game Pass for Microsoft, is that necessarily a bad thing? I'd love to know your thoughts, Happy. Why don't you take us?
I'm going to give you one key difference between the Division and Final Fantasy 15.
Okay.
The Division is at least a multiplayer game. So receiving updates keeps people playing. Final Fantasy 15 is a single-player experience that continues to receive updates to what most would argue should have been a complete experience from the get-go. Now, I don't believe they released Final Fantasy 15 under the guise that it, quote, wasn't finished. I think they actually believe they had a finished, and I'm putting in quotes because I'll explain in a second, finished story and product with the initial release. And they sought to improve it after feedback, and that is now their games of the service. Now, obviously, they planned out DLC, which is never a good thing to announce. It's not a great thing to have a list of things you won't have when the game comes out. So you're buying it under the pretense that you already have. You either A, have things to look forward to, or B, those are things that they've already worked out and aren't part of your base game experience. So they're trying to sell you something before you've even bought it, which is a little backwards in a sense. Now, then it comes down to perspective. I was happy with my $60 purchase with 15, and I was happy with my Season Pass purchase with 15. And you know what? I'll probably be happy with my Royal Edition pickup for 15 because I'm getting the Windows Edition, so I'm actually spending another 50. I'm not even spending just the 20 to update my console version. So
I would
All
update.
that's
To,
being
I would
spent.
update to the. I would update to the Royal Edition if it was then cross play with my Xbox, and
Yeah.
that's just because I play on Xbox. So it's like, but I haven't heard that and confirmed. So I'm just like, I'm gonna wait. Go ahead, I cut you off.
Yeah. So despite all of that, I still had a positive gaming experience. So I'm not as bothered. But I am bothered by the layers on layers of spending. But if they're going to put man hours towards working on the game after they've already released it, I think that after the train wreck that was the history of 15 and versus 13, to have a finished product in the first place is not something I thought I'd have in my lifetime. I was convinced that was vaporware and that was never going to release. That for what they accomplished in 3 years, I was pretty happy with it. And I think that if they had given Tabata the proper time and the proper resources to work on it from the start, we wouldn't have had what it ended up being with all these DLCs for a year, 2 years into the game.
The thing that I go with, especially the sword history of what became 15, because I believe what people originally saw is vaporware. We'll never see that. They repurposed as what they could. They took what of the story they could and they built it. And I actually, as an engineer, I'm impressed. Like what they delivered with 15 was better than I expected it to be, considering the sword history. I was sitting here just going like, this is going to be a train wreck, especially coming off of the rebuilding of 14. You know, so you look at this as an interesting time in Square Enix's life. And their development cycle was at 1.0 failure. They rebuild at 14. And then it's like, I think that there was a lot of pressure. And that's why I think we saw some of 14's funding essentially shift into 15 to get that done, because you don't want to go and say, hey, we did this and now we have to do it again with 15. Now there's going to be a 15 2.0. Now there's going to be 16, up to 16 2.0. Like everything we do first fails and then we do that. But as far as it goes with like, I think 15, is its own property, and I wish they gave Tabata like another year with it. I think that they felt like they had to get it out when they did because of just this history. If we didn't know about these characters and they didn't have these screenshots, if they weren't showing off CGI trailers and all this stuff from the past, like the CG trailers they showed off in the past aren't in 15. That stuff was built and scrapped because, versus 13 just failed, and a lot of that I think had to deal with just them as a company trying to figure out how to build games in a modern setting and style. But Chris, you have any thoughts there?
So you made an interesting point, Happy, that you bought the game at $60 and you were happy with that purchase, and then you bought DLC for $25 and you'll be happy as that purchase. And then at this totally separate junction in your life, once those have already earned their value, they owe you nothing. You have been offered to go back and for an additional $20, buy something new to you. Now, there are other people that can go back and buy previous experiences you have had and this for a total greater value or whatever, but that doesn't matter in the world of you, that you've been given a chance to pay $20 and get something new, and you think you'll be happy with that amount of content for 20 of your dollars, regardless of what anybody pays for their version of content. How do you decide if something's worth it? Because I think the issue here and the controversy comes from the fact that people want to compare, right? They're mad that other people are getting to experiencing something you already have for less money. How do you balance those things? Because when you walk into a game store, all games are $60 and they are not all the same experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's up to the individual. Like if I wasn't happy with my $60 initially, I'd probably be a lot more upset with the fact that not only are people getting it for $10 less, but it's actually more than $100 total in what I would have paid to even try to enjoy all of my initial purchases. And well, 85 for the initial, and I suppose another 20 to even get to where people are with the new Royal Edition. So it comes down to, by when I was done playing, I was happy. If I wasn't happy, I'd probably be more upset at this.
I think the question that just comes up to my mind, I'd love to know y'all's thoughts on this one, is that when is the right time to jump into games? Because we talk about like these persistent games, like even 15, like the thing is that 15, and Happy said it, that it's a single player experience, and then Division is obviously a multiplayer experience, but we're seeing this happen with more and more games. And I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing. I'm happy with my 15 purchase. The fact that they're bringing out new DLC, the change I want is, weave it into the same game. That don't make it so disjointed. I personally, I think that would be a great addition, but I'm happy because I'm enjoying the game and the content. Now, I'm somebody who jumped into Division late, and so I'm enjoying all the content. I'm not having to suffer through it. So the question is when is the right time to buy in? Because the real kicker here is that if people don't, there's not going to be updates. Like if nobody bought 15, there would be no DLC. If nobody bought Division when it came out, there would be no 1.8. They would have said, oops. And I think it also, like one thing that I do believe, it does come down to the individual company, like in publisher, Ubisoft being one of them, that they have continued to support their IP that they've done in this case, where then you look at companies like Bungie and Activision, especially with like Destiny 2, like, oh my gosh, like I don't even know when the right time would ever be to go back to that game as one. I know one of the things I want to kind of then twist this for Happy, because I'd love to hear his thoughts, because we haven't had this conversation yet. I remember when Destiny 1 was coming out, and I remember your video saying that you're announcing that you're going to play it. And I was excited. I was like, this looks interesting. And then it was like, no. And so we haven't had this conversation. I'd love to know your thoughts. Did you play Destiny 2? Or was Destiny 1 burned you so hard that you're like, no? As it relates to when is the right time to jump into games? Anyway.
Right. I only played Destiny 2 for about 20 minutes, and I didn't own it. I was actually at a convention, and I was recording it on like a 4K monitor with like a Titan for, just to try out the PC version. And my first impression was, hey, this looks like it at least has a story being attempted here, which is an improvement over the original. But as more and more things surfaced, I was like, this is exactly the same as Destiny 1. And I already know how I felt about that. So I said, you know what? I'm not playing Destiny 2. I said up until a week right before it came out, yeah, I'll probably play Destiny 2. And then someone's like, oh, you're not playing? I was like, maybe I'll wait for the PC version. I just kept watching it unfold.
Maybe I'll wait. I'll wait. Yeah.
And I was like, I don't think there will ever be a good time for me to pick up this game. Destiny 1 at the end of its life cycle was probably the peak of what Destiny players expected. And Destiny 2 was just a regression. Not only did all your progression get lost, but it was in a brand new game that made changes that it seemed like nobody actually wanted.
Yeah. It was sold with this like really like, okay, we've learned our lesson, and they said we're gonna make it faster so that you have less time waiting between gun to enemy and things like that. And then essentially you hit the nail on the head. Like I have no concept or confidence that Destiny 3 is not going to come out, and all my progress is going to be wiped. They sold Destiny 1 with this concept that you're going to have this progress, right? That you're investing in this character. And then I look at it and I look at 14 1.0 to 2.0, and I look at Destiny from version 1 to Destiny 2, and I'm just like, wow, 14 did that so right. They did, they Bahamut, thank you for fixing this game. But then I look at it and I got burned, I got burned by Destiny 2 hardcore. And so that's where I was like, I want to talk to Happy about
So to sum all this up, when is a game done? That's the one thing we haven't answered, is like, when is it appropriate to release a game? I mean, you develop a game, you announce it, your marketing team has a job. They come on at a certain point and they begin the hype machine. They have a job to do, and they're given a date, and their job is to sell games. They're not back in the development room. They're told, here's the features we have working, here's what we will have working, and they just run with that. They just treat that as the word of God, and they go off and sell it. They're not trying to lie to anybody. And then the developers over here go, oh, we ran into this hiccup we didn't see, and the deadline hasn't moved.
Right.
So are you supposed to push that deadline out? Are you supposed to release it and just be honest about what's missing? What is the definition of a game that's good to release?
A game that has a beginning, middle, and end. Unfortunately, I don't think it gets much more complex than that, because a game can be finished in every ways in the developer's eyes, and then get put out and be received horribly. And that's different than a game that gets pushed out and maybe the developers don't feel they're done with it, but people are enjoying it. There's such a variable there. And then also, even when you think it's done, it might not be, because there may be so much demand for more that you create more. And that's how Final Fantasy 15 ended up with another year of DLC. Is after Tabata was like, yeah, I thought we would be done, but then we were asking a bunch of people, hey, would you want more? And they said, yeah, it would be paid. Yeah. All right, I guess we're doing it then.
I think for me, like, to answer the question, I think it depends on the type of game and your preferences towards games. If you're a fan of an RPG and an MMO, and you understand and you're going into the relationship knowing that, especially like with like an MMO or any kind of persistent game, if you go in with the expectation that they're going to be growing pains, but as long as the developer, if you trust them and they're willing to work with you and take feedback and listen and make changes, then I think as long as you know that going in, then the game's done. It's because these with SaaS-based games, with SaaS being software as a service. So sometimes my engineer and me, I'm like, okay. With those kind of games, they always release in the state what's called MVP, so minimal viable product. What are the minimum amount of features that we can get this out and start monetizing it to help offset development costs? And if some companies aren't just flush with cash, like you look at Nintendo, Square now, like Square going into the launch of 4.0, 14, there was a I'm wondering they had probably some very
their financial reports were looking. It was still on an upward trend.
Well, okay, true that, but I was saying from what they've already spent. Like you've already kind of spent this much money. Yeah. So it's like that's going to have an impact. But Nintendo, like even like with the failure of the Wii U, it's like no, they could fail for the next 10 consoles and they'll still be flush with cash. But with these companies, like type of game, like are you a fan of that genre? Like so, Lost Sphere just came out, and Happy you played it, watched your stream on that, and made me actually go buy it. I got it for Switch because I was like, this is just perfect on the Nintendo Switch. But for me, like the reviews of it, like okay, 5, 6, 7s are out there. No, it's a hell of a good game, but I'm a fan of that type of game. Now, if I was not a fan of that type of game, it might be horrible. You might be like, why did I jump?
But then why are you buying it?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That's my thing. Why would you be like, I hate RPGs? Let me buy Lost Sphere.
I think that ties into what Chris was talking about with the marketing and the push. Like with the obviously Happy, you're big on Twitch. You've been on YouTube. There is this sense of wanting to be a part of this community of people like, hey, I like Happy for this. Oh, he's doing this. I'm going to check it out. And so it's that I think, it almost kind of puts the onus on us, and it should be. You should do your research as to what the experience is. And I honestly would say if your friends are interested in it, then that's something. Because I like playing with my friends. I think that's like what are we playing? We're playing this. Okay, well, maybe it's not the best game. We played Titanfall 2 for a freaking year. And it finally got good.
It did.
It
took a long time to get to what it should have been at launch.
Yeah.
But it got there.
It got there.
It did.
It got
to the point, but it was late enough that you didn't actually appreciate it. Like they're like, "Oh, tell me congrats, I made it." And it's like, no, I'm not going to tell you that.
Yeah, we don't have to reform our party.
I'm just going to stop complaining out loud. That is your reward.
I always look at things like that where it's like, listen, if one day someone purchases this game, they had a better experience than me, good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I always look at it that way. It's like I'm not selfish enough to believe that my experience should be the end of that experience for somebody else, and that they all need to share my exact experience.
I don't know where the scoreboard comes in. If somebody told me that, I don't know, my favorite movies growing up, they just bought all 10 of my favorite movies growing up that they've never seen, and they got them all for $10. I don't care. Like, I don't care. And yes, I probably spent a lot more money on those movies back then, but that was an exchange I made at that point in my life, where based on the information I had at that time, I spent an amount of money and I got what I exchanged that money for. I got the service back. I expected a level of entertainment and I got it. What that product goes on to do in transaction history means nothing to me. I don't care. In all honesty, I don't care about the experience of the other however many people bought PUBG. Mm-hmm. The game is still like in a not done state on Xbox, and it just finished getting done with its alpha on PC, in December?
Yeah.
And it's gone on, and it's doing incredibly well, but it's not done. And
they just
I
added
paid
Lootboxes
for it, and I got my value out of it. And if when it releases for less money than I paid during alpha, that's fine. That's fine, because I got to play it before then. I got to play it in the state it's in now, because that's a game that's not done, and it doesn't seem to bother anybody.
I think one of the interesting things that this is, I think this is a small problem when you look at the grand scheme of things. You get burned. You're going to get burned. The question, my hope for you is that you don't get constantly burned, in game purchases. But the nice thing is that with the medium of digital distribution, with streaming and YouTube and gaming being more of a conversation, games come back. They have longer lives. There was a fear that you'd be missing out, just like a TV show, right? Where everybody's talking about The Wire. Chris, you brought this up at one.
I just watched it. Watched it like a month ago.
Right, but you have nobody to sit down and talk to about The Wire with.
I had nobody to share it with.
Right. But so there's kind of the water cooler moment. Those moments are shifting into being more persistent. Happy you play 14 on stream, but then you play other games, and you just recently played Chrono Trigger. It's like, it was so cool to see you.
I'm glad you keep talking about Chrono Trigger and not Cross.
Oh, Cross. When you started playing Cross, I think I messaged you. I'm sorry, dude. Like, I'm not hanging out with this. Like, I'm like, this seems to be like a trial of endurance. I was like, go get it. I was like, no.
Good luck.
But no, it's like, but the fact is like, you get to have that experience now, like as an adult, like in this environment where, like, for me, it's seeing that you were playing it, I was like, you hadn't played this? Oh, I didn't know that. Let's talk about it. Like, I loved this game. This game meant so much to me as a kid. So much to me. It defined what, honestly, like when you look at 10-2, and not 10-2, 13 Part 2. Like, I look at that game and I look at Chrono Trigger. I'm like, how the heck do you not understand how to handle time travel? Like, you did it perfectly. Just look at this game. Just, those are rules that people would accept. And then, oh my God, I don't want to. I'd get on a rant with the paradoxes, and I don't want to do that to you guys.
You're about 10% the way there already.
Oh, okay, fine. Anyway, how the hell does everybody know that there's a paradox? Like, that's the problem. Like, you can't just, like, there's a paradox over there. You shouldn't know that because you are a time traveler. Thank you. So, like, anyway, my point being that, games mean that conversation, that piece, driven on this, like, social media, being able to partake in that. Happy, I'd love to know, like, at this point, as we transition into community feedback here in a second, but, like, what are your final thoughts on this? And then as a streamer, as a YouTuber, like, you made the jump from YouTube to be more Twitch, right? Like, I'm understanding the history, right?
So I was helping with charity stuff on Twitch, and then I was doing videos on YouTube, and then I went back to Twitch, pretty much. And then I do both now. So,
like, as a gamer who is a public figure who plays these games, and then has these experiences and works within these communities, like, what is your overall thoughts on that experience? Like, I guess if anything else, like, I think we get asked a lot, like, and we're not big on Twitch by any stretch of the imagination, but like, how you get started. Like, would you have any advice? Or any kind of thing for anybody who's listening, who's trying to think, what should they do first? Should it be YouTube? Should it be Twitch? Should it be a combination? I'd love to know your thoughts there.
First piece of advice, don't quit your day job. Don't go in being like, yeah, I don't need any of that. First of all, I say that not even just because you might not make it, but because having a supporting income when you're starting to be able to get things like equipment or do giveaways or buy the newest game coming out. Those are important. If you have no income, then you just start begging for money from people who are watching you, however many it may be, and they're the ones paying for it, and that's not sustainable. So don't do that. Don't quit your day job is advice number one. Number two is you need to figure out who you are. That sounds dumb, but if you don't know what your brand will be and what kind of brand you want to represent, then you're just making videos or you're just streaming. If you don't have a theme, if you don't have something people will remember you for, then great, just make YouTube videos, just stream on Twitch. Just do that. Do it for fun. Who cares?
Yeah.
But if you're serious about that wanting to be what you want to do, you need to identify these things early, because the people who are most successful now, I've seen so many people in the last year who immediately identified a brand and are seeing incredible success. Friend of mine, Daniel the Demon. He is blown up because he found his brand in the name Daniel the Demon. So what does he do? He has this demon thing that he does where it kind of it overwrites his body, almost like a 3D capture.
Oh, cool.
And he does a voice changer, and everyone loves it. It's something that no one else was doing, and everyone would remember him for it. He identified very quickly what his brand was. And a bunch of other people, you see a lot of it on Twitch. If you just follow the trends on Twitch, you'll see what figuring out your brand really means.
Oh, cool. That is good advice.
That's a big, big thing. And if you want to just do it for fun, do it. That's my last piece of advice. Start by doing it for fun to see if you even like doing it in the first place. Because if you're like, oh, I did this video, oh, I love it, and then you can't take everyone just destroying you from the inside or from the outside, who even knows?
Both. Like,
then it gets a lot tougher.
Like I never knew how many people just absolutely hate gingers until we started doing YouTube. Like, seriously, I was like, Chris was like, I think he was worried about me. He's like, Brian, don't look.
Some of the comments were so bad, I would delete them and just not tell Brian about them.
And it's like, I get the notification on my phone. Like,
he doesn't even need this in his brain. Like, this doesn't even need to be something that happened.
Yeah, I would say, like, for me, I think Happy kind of hit the thing is like, you gotta have a thick skin. And I try to listen because it's like if somebody is like, you know, hey, I suck because this, and this. It's like, okay, well, like, is there any truth to it? I always like try to ask myself that to see, like, because it's like, oh, could I get better at either editing this video, or is my opinion incredibly like out of left field, etc. You know, so it's like, you know, I try to do that. I've always, you know, kind of done that, etc. I do want to thank you, Happy, before we jump into our third segment. When we first got started, obviously Stormblood was announced. And I put out a video talking about how I thought like the kind of the idea that is now the time for them to cut classes, and you gave us what we called the MrHappy bump, and so you
said like offhand in a video, like, I think it was said well by this Brian guy on this other channel, and you just moved on to the next subject.
And it was like, we just thought, like, for us, like, when we're like, hey, we're at 7 subscribers, now we're at 100. It's like, it was like, what happened? This is insane. Oh my gosh. Anyway, so I did want to thank you for that. All right, we are transitioning into our third and final segment of the podcast. If you guys saw the episode 1, you should know what's coming up. We've got community feedback. And with that, we've got several questions. We're going to jump into Crazy's comment right here. This is also coming off of MrHappy's Final Fantasy 15 video talking about the Royal Edition. And so we got 2 more comments for this, and then we got another topic, and we're going to highlight those. Chris, do you have that up on screen?
Yeah, so Crazy Bean said, I'm pretty impressed with their post-launch support for this game, to be honest. Yes, it would have been nice to have all these things at the start, but whatever. Treatments like this is what makes games like Rainbow Six Siege go from okay to one of the best FPS games out there, for example. And I think that's an interesting example they list, because Siege is one of those games that I expected to get support for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how much you follow.
I feel like they did a good job at setting that.
They've kind of ended it. Like, they're kind of bringing that to a close.
Not really, dude. Like, I think you might have misread that, because Siege is not getting Siege is not getting a sequel. They just released new operators. That's what I'm saying. Like, Ubisoft is.
I thought they were bringing it to an end.
No, that Siege is going to go on for eternity at this point. It grows month over month. It is a huge game.
Good.
It's got great gameplay. In fact, I own it. Like, I was like, this is like, I suck at it. Let's just be clear at that. Like, I get destroyed, and so it's like, it's not necessarily the most fun experience, but you can also play against AI bots and things like that with kind of the terrorist hunt and different mission structures. But they announced no sequel, and people lost their mind. People got upset about this. That there was not going to be a sequel to Siege. They don't need it. That's where Destiny 2 went wrong. That's where games don't need these like sequels anymore. They'll do Siege 2.0, and maybe they'll sell it as a packaged physical edition, but it's the same. And that's the same hope I have for the Division. If Division's a 1.8, if they say Division 2.0, where you can go and buy the game, but if it continues the story and it continues your progress, even if they change up a lot of stuff, who cares? That's what I want, and I'm so happy to see Ubisoft, and that's why I was like, they're doing something right over there. Like, I think they've kind of started to get it, and the Siege launched in a bad state. It was like, bummer.
It's not a game I followed because it just came out of the gate rough, and I was like, well, okay, and I just moved on.
Yeah. And so it's like, and maybe they'll be able to learn enough so that they can launch games without those problems, without those growing pains. Because imagine if Happy was still playing the Division today. You know, you own it, right?
Yeah, I own it. I mean, I like FPS games were something I played in high school. Like, I played Halo, I played Call of Duty, I played all this in high school. But as I got into adulthood, I moved away from a lot of them. So now I kind of only really pay attention to ones that have RPG aspects. In the Division, well, RPG aspects out the wazoo. Same with Destiny. So that was why I purchased it, but I wasn't sold on their RPG aspects after playing it for a bit, plus whatever launch issues they may have had. So I didn't even, their biggest down wasn't even at launch. They had a really big problem, I think, within a few months after launch with one of the content updates.
They did. And they also didn't have a good monetization model either. Like, it was kind of like, well, they had paid DLC, but they've shifted into, or you can purchase things, but it's all the updates have been free after all the DLC. And I'm thinking maybe that's just going to be the way that they go about it. That's where I think Destiny really went wrong, because they monetized. So it's like, okay, you have your paid DLC and you have your paid loot boxes and you have this, and it's like, just decide what you want to be, you know? And when they make paid DLC,
we don't mind you making money, but you can't triple dip.
Well, and the triple dip with Destiny's biggest fallback was, like, they were a subscription-based game. It's not that they don't call themselves subscription. Whenever you cut out people, like, if you don't buy this, you can't keep playing the base game that you had. That's a problem, you know, and that's just like ended up being this big ordeal for them. And I'm hoping these companies all see our anger and frustration.
They should have just had subscriptions, and if they wanted people to have more loot, they either could have sold the loot directly, or if they wanted to do it as some form of of benefit, then maybe there's like different tiers of subscription. So
Yeah.
if I pay X, then I get free loot boxes every month or whatever, to get people to kind of opt into higher level subscriptions. They layered it too deep, and instead of it looking like, oh, I get to choose how many layers I get to be a part of, it just looked greedy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot we could discuss with Destiny 2 in particular that I don't think we have time for. But
No.
as Drakili says in the chat, I mean, one big thing is the mobile model that Siege took with the operators, where you can unlock them by playing, or if you just want a shortcut to having them all, but they're all available to everyone. You know, There's not only one route. That's another thing. I
think it's important. I think that's a great point that they bring up there in chat, and thank you very much, because I agree. It's that you play and then you pay for what works best for your experience. Like if you want, I got tons of time to play, let me experience it. All right, we got another comment regarding the Final Fantasy 15 video, and then we'll move on to the last topic.
Zoella?
Mm-hmm. Zoella.
I am so sick of Final Fantasy 15, I guess that is. The space game.
Yeah, FF15.
I wonder if this is how 13 haters felt when they kept making Lightning games. Only way they could get me to care is an episode Arena.
Aranea.
Mm-hmm.
She's a character.
Perfect.
Yeah, Chris has only played the 15 comrades with me.
Aranea is only in there for like 10 seconds. So
yeah.
They seem to have these like
I don't know where the time comes to play all the games. The fact that I like any games outside of Square Enix and put time in them, it means I am immediately behind on Square Enix games, because they just have unlimited time that you can put into them.
Mm-hmm. That's good. It's a good place to be, but no, you're fine. Happy, what are your thoughts there? Because it's obviously so Zoella draws a comparison to 13.2 and 13.3 with 15 and the DLCs. What are your thoughts? Like, is there any comparison to be drawn there, or is this a stretch?
I would more likely compare 15 and its DLCs to something like Kingdom Hearts 2 and Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix, where back in the day we didn't get DLC updates. You had to repurchase the game as the Final Mix, and it was only available in Japan, so you probably went through some import stuff. But let's say you were in Japan, you were buying a whole new game, the exact same game with more stuff for the full game price again. And people did it, and I never heard anyone complain about Final Mix back in the day. So when it comes to comparing the Lightning games, I can understand the emotion of seeing it for so long. You're kind of just sick of seeing it. World of Warcraft has suffered from that after being, a top dog in the MMO industry for years, where people are just sick of seeing people talk about it or anything that comes from that game, and they just instinctually hate it. Like they've programmed themselves just hate seeing it so much. But the fact that you could say, if you did this one thing, I would no longer be sick of it, tells me that you might be sick of it, but you're still invested in it. Mm-hmm. Because you can't, if you're sick of something, you want nothing to do with it. As soon as you say, but if they did this, you're still invested in some aspect of it for me. So I think it's a little bit of, there's a little bit of, what's the word I'm looking for? Hypocriticism in that.
Yeah. I don't remember what game developer said it, but he said he was being asked in some interview about all the negative reviews on whatever game it was. And his response, I just remember the response. I don't even remember the game it was about or anything. And his response was, if people have time to go on the internet and complain about us, there is still a chance we can fix this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's when people stop complaining that they're not invested.
So
yes. you want to you're taking time out of your day and effort out of your day to go and say, this could be better if. And so he kind of viewed complaints as like one step down from compliments instead of being the total opposite.
I think it's important, because it's really interesting from that perspective, because if you are taking the time, there is a care. So Zoella obviously cares about Final Fantasy. I care about Final Fantasy. I get the concept, because there is a part of me that says that here's the DLC, right? So the nice thing is that Square Enix is a huge company, but there is a part of me that no matter what says, are they working on 16? Well, the answer is obviously yes, and and everybody has expectations for 16. They want 16 to be this and do this, and hopefully they can make a game that can hit the majority of all those expectations. But there's a fear that when they keep talking about this, that they keep doing it, that they sell it short, that they you take it and you take what was really good, and then you spread it so thin that there's just no flavor or no interest or no excitement about it. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm glad that this, they're on season 93 of Final Fantasy 15, and in this, it's just like, I don't even remember why we're here. We're just, I'm gonna go. They go with this guy, and he's doing something not interesting. So there's a risk, and there's definitely a challenge that with that, and that's, I mean, that falls onto them. I think if you're feeling that way about any game specifically, step back, take a break, go play something else. There's tons, there's so many options out there, so many good things to play. And if you are definitely sick of hearing it, check your alerts, check your filters. Like, don't go seek out things that obviously have that. Like, if you're sick of 15, don't watch a 15 video. If you're tired of hearing about 14, take a break. Like, I know a lot of people hold on to these things. They for whatever reason, everybody has a legitimate reason that they hold on to something. But like, if you're burned out of 14, step away, take a break. There's so many other great games to play, and you might actually appreciate 14 more in the long run when you do come back and you see like, oh, they did fix that issue that I was having, or now there's so much great content that I'm interested in, etc. All right, go ahead. You have something else, Chris, or Happy?
Nope.
Okay.
No, I'm good.
All right.
So the last subject is should Final Fantasy fix its mod issue?
Oh yeah.
It's a big subject.
It's a big subject. We got 2 comments on this. I love to see Mr. Happy's making some faces over here.
First
Can't
of all,
see him on camera right now.
I know you just wrote it quickly in the outline, but whether or not there even is an issue with its current mod stance is already its own debate. Because when you have something that spans across multiple platforms, one of which is a console where mod support is going to be almost impossible, Yoshi P has made it incredibly clear that he wants everybody to have access to the same experience across the board. So whether or not we want mods, it is almost impossible to see how mods would ever come into this game. The easiest game to compare it to is World of Warcraft, because they're kind of the 2 big MMOs. So I'll start with the first comment here, and then we'll see what I know Happy's face is contorting here. So
you can't see it on screen, but he's making some awesome faces.
So many of my FC mates who still play WoW say mods like DBM, which is it's a boss mods, ruined rating for them. Also, the moment you said leave the PS4 and Mac behind, you not only lost Yoshi P, you lost a lot of players like me in supporting your position. What is nice is to be able to customize for you, but if it becomes mandatory just a bit later, it's kind of, sorry, it's a little wordy here. Having trouble reading. I've already gotten flack for being on PS4 and not knowing my DPS from ACT. The UI developers work very hard to make it sure that everything's customizable, so just need to be asked for improvements. Plus, what is wrong with seeking out community-created guides for stuff like crafting and fishing? Yoshi P respects WoW, but I feel that he has a pretty good feel for what to borrow or take inspiration from and what to leave behind. Mods is one of those things.
You have to give me some context, because this is from one of your videos.
So this is from one of my videos. And so what I asked was, I've recently picked back up WoW because we get a lot of comments in our section because we do beginner guides. And so beginner guides over on Work to Game means you have people who often just came from somewhere else. And World of Warcraft is a big piece of that. And so they come in and they're lost, and they're going to miss things that they had before. And so they're like, oh, I really like all these things, but how come I don't have X? And one of the big ones is mods, because WoW has things like DBM, Deadly Boss mods, which literally puts warnings and things on your screen to warn you about mechanics of established fights. There's no way for it to do it about fights that are new in progression, but once something is not that newest progression, it's a way to try kind of making Savage a little more like Simon Says, because it says like, hey, in the next 5 seconds, this ability's coming out, and it has a big timer that's counting down for you. And if you haven't moved by then, you're going to die. And so that's something that exists in WoW, and it's not something that exists in Final Fantasy. And so this particular person says he plays on the PS4, so he already gets crap for not having access to meters. He will never have access to meters. And so kind of likes that Final Fantasy XIV doesn't have the mods that WoW does. What do you think about the difference in kind of just the mod communities in general and things like API support?
Okay, so I'll start by saying I am in support of mods within some stretch. I always felt like relying on a third-party program was embarrassing as a player. And I still relay that to this day. I had never had issues in World of Warcraft remembering a boss's rotation. Some people, it makes it so they can focus on their job better. And there are some people who need mods not for just because they need it to help them teach the boss. Some people have disabilities that things like DBM can help with. So for example, they could be, they could be slightly deaf. So maybe not the sounds DBM makes, but the flashing of the screen is a different, type of visual cue that they're using to identify something. So there's different reasons to and from, but I am always in support of API and modding. When it comes to a game being on a PS4, though, I am on the side of I want the game to be as fair for everyone, but I will also be brutally honest, it's not. So wanting it that way, it doesn't matter.
Well, that's the thing. Chris plays on PS4. I'm on PC, and if we want to know what his DPS is, I have to fire up ACT.
For him.
Exactly, and it's that for their my wife is constantly always like, "How am I doing?" Because not because she wants to rub it in anybody's face, but because she wants to do better. She wants to learn, and the game does not at this moment teach you how to play. Somebody was like, I put out some video and they're like, how, the game teaches you how to play. I go, no, it doesn't. It gives you a set of tools and then you can go figure it out. But unless you go watch like Happy or Mistech or anybody who's putting out guides, or rotation guides or anybody, like there's lots of creators out there, especially in YouTube and even in written word that says like, okay, here's the most optimal rotation for openers. Here's this and this. Like you're not really going to know because the game is not going to feed back to you that, you did it. And I get Yoshi P's position on it. When we talk like DPS meters being the first one, I think if they opened up an API, that would be the first thing there. But the thing is there is an obvious difference in PS4 and PC because you can do this. And if they could make it to where in mods, because I'm for it. But one of the things that I think, and Chris brought up in the video, I think really well, is that you unleash an army of junior developers to make these things for you, and then you can see what works, and then you can incorporate it. And Yoshi P talked about doing that back in 2.0, and it's 4.0. And it's the point where I think we as the 14 community kind of just stopped asking about mods because they kept saying it's coming.
They also just kept changing things in the game. It's like, well, I would have used the mod for that. That was their idea. If it's something that people would want to mod, then we should be adding it here. The only one they take a stance against is the DPS meters due to toxicity, which for me has led to some other negative choices in Final Fantasy XIV, specifically the lack of speaking in the feasts, which is another thing that was done due to toxicity. So I feel like they're letting the loud few dictate the needs, and I think there are restrictions you can put in place to make it so that information is private. No matter what, if you're on PS4, someone on PC is using ACT. Like somebody, and you're going to run across them at some point is going to be using ACT. So you're already at the disadvantage of not having it, whether or not you want mods to exist in the game or not.
Correct.
That's how I feel about jump potions, right? They're already here. So let's just make sure they're implemented correctly. They're here. There's nothing we can do about it. And you can choose to use it or not use it, but other people are, and they are here. And it's not going anywhere. Right.
They're not going to get rid of that. No, but it was really a good thing for them to add it because they put the game constantly at a disadvantage with how the game expands story-wise. All of a sudden, it's like we were trying to get Chris's brothers to play, and it's like, hey, come play the feast with us. But to do so, I need you to play 80 hours of an RPG before you can even like touch this content. That was back in Heaven's Word, and it's definitely gotten a lot easier now. But oh my gosh, like it's like at some point, like what's there's answers and they're hard because and the jump potions are easy answers, right? They're the easy quick solution because the hard work is just going to take too much time to actually to fix kind of the underlying root problem.
I think the Final Fantasy community has an interesting view on mods in general. So my first major MMO that I dumped thousands of hours into was World of Warcraft. And so a lot of times the terminology I jump to, I'm not a big lore guy, but the lore that I just naturally have absorbed is more Blizzard based because I just put more time into it at an age where I didn't skip as many cutscenes. And over the years, I skipped more cutscenes. So every game I play, I know less about the lore because I just realized that for me as a gamer, what I want to do is play the game. I have time that I watch things on Netflix and stuff, and I have times that I play games. And so I don't need them to mix. That's mine. There are two other guys in this chat that know a whole lot more about lore than I ever will as a result of that, and that's fine. So when I think about mods, it's just a way to customize that. That's things like So there's a battle pet system in WoW, and there's these little pets out in the world like Pokemon. So imagine if Vermilion, like you could go harvest those pets.
I don't want to imagine anything.
Oh man,
Vermilion could be everywhere, and there was this different kind of form, and you could go out and fight these little battles, or like Triple Triad. If you could go out and you could search on the ground for cards, well, there might be a mod that like just shows you kind of where those cards are, like sightseeing logs, because I want the end result, and the hunt isn't the part that appeals to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are so many times that things like that, I have a browser open and I am literally doing the same thing. I'm searching on the browser for where to go for my leaves, or where to go to harvest something, because in game it's not made nearly as fast as Google. And a lot of these mods, all they're doing is just bringing that into the game. Where it starts to change the game is DPS meters, DBM, and the auction house. And I think DBM makes the game more approachable to people that don't want that progression. So I don't care if it means that in a group content when I'm picking up pugs that they'll not stand in things. Please download it.
You say that like that DBM actually made people. I don't believe DBM made anyone play smarter. I've rated with way too many pugs in WoW.
I don't think it made it better or worse. I don't think it made it better or worse. Either side said it would. I think it just left it right down the middle.
People still play the way they play, man.
Yeah, that's it.
I think damage meters allow people to improve that want to improve. If people want to be toxic, they're going to be toxic either way. And if people don't want to improve, they're not going to improve. They're not. There are DPS literally standing still. There is no way they don't know that they're not doing damage. I mean, they're not even moving. And then the last one is Auction House. And I think the Auction House mod support would make Final Fantasy better.
I think so. We're getting the mobile app here in a little bit, hopefully. They keep they keep talking and teasing that. All right, guys, that is all of community feedback. I do want to say we did it. Changing the background. We've gone gold. Oh man, this has been a ton of fun. Thank you guys, and to chat, everybody who's been hanging out. Thanks to MrHappy for joining us. Before we sign off for the podcast, I do want to give the floor to our guest for taking the time out of his busy stream schedule. Can't even say that straight. To come and join us here on Casually Hardcore. MrHappy, anything. The floor is yours. We'd love to. Any thoughts you have? Yeah.
Any thoughts I have? I was going to use it to do the usual time. Thanks for having me. It was a fun discussion. I don't get to come on shows and do these kind of discussions very frequently. The only podcast I run is the Final Fantasy 14 one. And I generally don't have the time to organize an entire other show to dedicate to things like this. So I appreciate getting to talk about some topics that I may not have otherwise gotten to talk about. Also, thanks to those comments that you grabbed. Thanks for commenting on my videos and making it into this podcast, because man, do I refrain from commenting back on a lot of stuff on YouTube.
You have like over 140,000 subs. I checked we were checking your numbers as I was kind of prepping the show, and I'm like, we're at like 15,000, something like that. And it's like we try, like, we work hard on having that conversation. I'm like, I couldn't imagine how many comments that you get, and it's like, okay, well, which one do you engage with, etc. So that's it's something that we try, and at some point we know there's going to be a point where there are too many comments for the two of us to anywhere near respond, and I don't look forward to that. Like, I'm not looking forward to that growth, because
it's not great, trust me.
But so that's one of the things we'll do. So for we on the podcast, so MrHappy alluded to, he's got his podcast it's Tuesday, typically State of the Realm.
Typically, unless there's a good reason to push it back, which the week of March 13th will likely be pushed back.
So if you guys haven't heard, patch 4.25 launching March the 13th, which is going to be great. Some Eureka is making its way finally into the game itself. I'm personally very excited about that, especially a former 11 player. But you guys say, if you haven't, it's kind of funny. Like, if you haven't heard of MrHappy, this is him. You can find him on Twitch. You can find him on YouTube. And so he streams daily. Sometimes you stream on the weekends too, I noticed.
I stream 7 days a week.
Man, you are a freaking tank at that.
7 days a week, 7 hours a day.
You're a machine.
You are a machine. I'm like, man.
Not to mention posting to YouTube.
And posting to YouTube and all that. So you check him out on Twitch. Check him out on YouTube. Check out his State of the Realm. It's a Final Fantasy 14 driven podcast. with tons of special guests. Like you bring on Ethis, we've seen Larry. You obviously have Sly, aka Gray Fox, aka You're My Boy Blue.
That's my boy.
So it's like it's a really great and informative show. You got tons of things that you're going on. So I'm plugging you there. Let's see here. I'm trying to think.
50 hours a week of playing. I mean, if MrHappy doesn't know it, it might not be known yet.
That's not true.
So there is plenty that I go to you for on information. So you're definitely a big person in the Final Fantasy space, and we appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. So, and then for Work to Game, what we'll do is we'll take this podcast, throw it up on YouTube. We're Work to Game, like Chris said, we focus like on kind of beginner guides, all kinds of different content and games and things like that. So that's it. That's the podcast. That's just casually hardcore. We did it, my name is Brian. This is Chris. You can catch us over on YouTube at Work to Game or on Twitch occasionally as well. I do appreciate everybody in chat hanging out. But with that, if nobody has anything, I guess, Chris, do you have any final thoughts?
Nope, that's it. That's it. I stream on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, but not today because I'm going out of town for a work trip. So go catch Happy because I think you're going right back to live, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining. We will be back next month in April for our kind of monthly. We have I don't have the confirmed guest, but Larry, Czar, and Ethis Asher have said that they're going to come on the show. So we don't know which is who, and we're also working and making other contacts as well for the podcast and for our guest spot. All right, I've been talking for an hour. Thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you soon, and you have a fantastic day.
Take care, everyone.